Welcome to ERMAHGERD CAST number 75.
What the hell are we going to call this?
Uh, I don't know. Same old shit song.
Strong
Um,
female characters.
yeah, strong female characters. Strong in quotes. Female characters. The brand new, never thought of before. No one's ever done this. When in comics, these people that are doing this now, they are the pioneers of strong female characters. Nobody was willing to go where no one would go since the 1940s. These people today are doing it. They're doing it right, I guess.
Bullshit.
I don't know. I know.
I mean, the thing is that if you actually read classic science fiction stories like shorts, Alfred Bester was doing actual strong female characters in like the 20s. And he was married to an architect.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, feminism, you're making a lot of claims that aren't really backed up by the evidence.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if you go back and look at stuff from like ancient Greek myths, they have probably stories of that, and ancient Japanese myths have a lot of really strong women in there. In fact, most ghost stories revolve around female ghosts, and they always win.
Mm.
So they do.
Okay, well, I mean, well, let's see what they have to say.
All right, so we're looking at an excerpt that was going around from a comic. I believe this is the new Mockingbird comic. So I guess a little bit of background before I look at this page. So the Mockingbird character has been around since the 1960s, and if not, I'm pretty sure that's how old she is. Yeah, she's from the 60s or the very early 70s. So we're talking like 50 years old now. Okay.
Okay.
And the Mockingbird character was essentially like a secret agent, well trained, martial artist and master of espionage and so on. She was like a spy, and she could fight and stuff. And she was actually made as sort of a counter to a DC character called the Black Canary in a way. Although the Black Canary had like powers, they decided that she wouldn't have any powers. She would just fight with sticks, screama sticks that would turn into a pole, and she had all these cool gadgets and all that, but she didn't do any fighting. So she was very similar to Black Widow in that regard. And Mockingbird used to, she was part of the Avengers for a while. She was part of the West Coast Avengers. She helped lead the team. She was invaluable, always was. Okay, and of course, back in those days, comics were always, they always sort of had something to say politically about stuff. Like, we've had comics doing things during wartime that was like, promoting people to go buy war bonds and to help keep the morale up during, World War II. And after, during the time of the civil rights movement, comics were reflecting the times then. During the time of the war on drugs in the 80s, comics were reflecting those times as well. I mean, they've always been, staying with the times and stuff, and the level of success that they achieved sort of varied depending on the ideologies of the people involved. But in general, people, remember that stuff. But it seems like as we get, maybe it's just me, but it seems like as we get more and more comfortable and we reach, a place where people feel like there's no need for more of this, the more really dumb they get with the way that they approach, doing these things. And so this book, at least these excerpts that we found, I think it exemplifies that, because it's trying to make a statement about, well, women in comics, I guess, or women characters in comics. So let's look at what they did specifically. All right, so this first panel shows a young Bobby Morse. That's Mockingbird. When she was a little girl, and they have her a little like plump, and she's got a cape tied around her neck and braces and bandages from, because I guess she's a tomboy or something. And it says, when I was a kid, I did everything I could do to get superpowers, radiation exposure. And then the next panel.
How did she manage that? Like, did she break a bone?
No, I guess she just managed to get a doctor to X-ray her. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think
Isn't that
they.
sort of like
I don't think you can just get.
malpractice?
Well, I don't know. Don't they inject you with something first? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of X-ray you're getting. If it's just an X-ray to determine if you have a broken bone, they don't inject you with anything.
Yeah.
And if they're trying to look at your circulatory system or some sort of system that needs to be highlighted that's sort of soft, they might they might give you like a barium enema or make you swallow that kind of shit just because it'll light up your soft tissues like your digestive system or your circular. But I don't see why they would just expose a kid to radiation for no particular reason. And I apologize. I know this is comics. You're supposed to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
But, as a comics creator, I try to at least as a creator, as a storyteller, period, I try to at least make things plausible. I mean, if you're going to go for a comic where people can fly and shoot shit out of their hands, I think you need to be really careful about these details.
Well, that's just it too, though. Like, because I read a lot of the older ones from like the 60s and 70s. I have a lot of them. They call them masterworks. They're really old, but they're the most popular ones. And I think that when it came to the books that were sort of centered around science, the people who made them tried to be as accurate as possible. Like, they tried to at least work within that. It was sort of like people who were writing science fiction. It was sort of the same idea. Like, when Stan Lee was doing the Fantastic Four, he wanted to tell exciting and adventurous stories, but he also wanted to try to put in some real science. So he tried to look up, stuff that was going on and maybe certain theories and then apply them, see how he could use that stuff, the existing science, in something. So yeah, I mean, we were expected to suspend our disbelief to a degree, but at the same time, at least back then, they used to actually try to do science fiction so that if someone says, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, they could say, oh, well, we did our homework, or at least we tried to do our homework. I don't think they do that as much anymore, though.
Yeah, this is just crap writing.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. If she had some sort of story where she, like something I did was incredibly stupid, is there was this excavation in one of the by my house, and they had this pile of dirt, so I tried to jump it on my BMX bike.
Yeah.
I didn't break anything. Sure as fuck hurt my chest and I lost my ability to breathe for a while, and got laughed at. But if they had some sort of story like that, and she actually was, almost, maybe broke her leg or something, and she did that intentionally to try to get an X-ray, that would have been. But this doesn't make any sense.
No, it looks like she just asked the doctor if he would X-ray her, and he said sure.
And they wouldn't do that. I'm pretty sure. Well, maybe in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, maybe, but that's another thing that's a little bit hard to pin down. Is I don't know if this is supposed to be taking place during a time period where that would be the case, because, well, that we're gonna get into some other weird canon shit in a second here that doesn't make sense. Okay, so. All right.
Well, I mean, if it was the ERA era, then it probably would have been like the 60s.
Yeah, probably. But that would have been her as, well, let's see. This first image is her as a really little girl. And then later she's a little bit older.
Gotcha. And for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what ERA refers to, it's the Equal Rights Amendment that was eventually scuppered by Phyllis Schlafly and all of the women who realized that the ERA wasn't going to give them anything they didn't already have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, shall we move on?
Okay, yeah. So in the next panel, this is just important to point out. In the next panel, there is a boy and her. Well, I'm going to have this displayed on when I do the post anyway. But there's a boy asking Bobby chicken pox, and she's saying spider bites. And it says arachnoid farming, so she's trying to get bitten by a radioactive spider, in case you hadn't figured it out. And she's wearing a t-shirt with a Spider-Man logo on it, just to drive that point home. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because Spider-Man, Bobby she was older than Peter Parker in the comics. Peter Parker was a teenager, she was an adult around that time. So that doesn't make sense right off the bat. Like, I know that that these characters are ageless, and you know, a lot of them stay the same age from the point that they were conceived. But you still, even if they're all frozen in time, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have, like, that panel just doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. Like, it doesn't. You don't need to even use this as an example of why the character really wants to get superpowers, and the whole radioactive spider bite thing. It's not even that funny. I don't know. I guess that's what it was supposed to be, because it's been done to death as a, you know, well, I tried to get myself bit by a radioactive spider. Like, that's really tropey and dull. And on top of that, it doesn't make sense because Bobby is older than Peter. So Peter would be a littler kid than her, therefore not have been bitten yet, therefore there'd be no Spider-Man. So how does she have a Spider-Man shirt? And then on top of that, what's with the Ms. lunchbox? I don't even know what that represents. What? I don't know.
Maybe the Ms. Magazine?
Yeah. What does Ms. Magazine have a lunchbox? I mean, I thought it was Ms. Magazine too when I saw it. But
you'd think that yeah, it's a little bit weird. Well, maybe Miss Marvel?
No, Ms. Marvel didn't exist she came out in the 1970s because there was a Captain Marvel that was a man that was alive that was in the comics in the 70s, and he ended up dying of cancer, and then a Ms. Marvel came right around that time to replace him. So this might be the 70s, but there's no Ms. Marvel. And I think that's a Ms. Magazine reference, personally, because Ms. Marvel didn't even look like that anyway. That's like a woman with sunglasses. Is that supposed to be Gloria Steinem? I think that's supposed to be Gloria Steinem on her lunchbox. Like, I think that they're constructing Bobby as a feminist from day one. It seems to me, because I don't know what else that could be a reference to. Now, maybe somebody who knows more about the retconning that's been going on in comics or can, like, you know, clarify, but I haven't been able to find any evidence to explain it. Is that the Ms. Magazine logo? That's what I want to know. I'm going to look it up really quick because I'm curious about that. Ms. Magazine logo. Ms.
Yes.
Yep, it is. It's the Ms. Magazine logo. They
okay, so
that's all it is. It's a blatant plug. Yeah. And that's just it too. Like, this is what I don't get. Like, okay, when I was a kid, those like tin lunch boxes, I'm not certain if that's what this is, but I think it is. Those tin lunch boxes were super cool. And they came with a thermos, which you can see that there's a little thermos there. And that was big in like the at least when I was a child. So between the 70s and 80s, we had them. But they were always of really fun stuff, like TV shows, like the Bionic Woman and Wonder Woman. And I
had a black hole one from Disney's Black Hole. Yeah.
I had a Dukes of Hazzard one. So yes, and I think I had a Dukes of Hazzard one for a long time as a child, and I think when it was time to replace it, because they get this really like funny smell on the inside over time. I don't know if it's moldy or if it's just the metal or what, but you have to, you just end up like wanting to replace it because it just smells weird, and the thermos ends up smelling weird too. I think it was replaced by like an Incredible Hulk. And I had an Incredible Hulk one from the TV show. So everything was all, I mean, obviously it was just like ways of marketing television shows and film and cartoons to kids. They made them for all that. But I don't know that there was such thing as a Ms. Magazine lunchbox. But let's just pretend that existed. And then pretend that Bobby actually wanted one. Like she was in the store with her mom. And even though she really wanted to be a superhero really bad, according to this arc, the lunchbox she wanted the most was the Ms. Magazine lunchbox with Gloria Steinem on it.
Yeah, it's like that's a little bit. Oh, I don't know what to say, but I just wonder about just to pull it back to a meta level. Are they trying to actually capture? Because at some point, the comic book companies in the U.S. realized that there was actually a market for comic books for girls, and Japan had actually captured that market. I wonder if they're trying to, with this crap, they're trying to actually capture the girls market for comics. The only problem is that it doesn't. Girls are not gonna read this. That the stuff coming out of Japan is what they want to read. This is, I don't even know what this is. I guess it's what really uncool older feminist women think girls want to read.
No, I mean, yeah, like angry. I'm thinking like angry 20-something just out of academia feminists that wanted to be writers in some capacity but didn't want to do comics. But this is the only job they could get. This is what I think they're doing. And as far as a woman's market goes, or a girl's market, there has been a girl's market in American comics for a long time as well. From young girls stuff, like that will be, I guess, what people consider to be girly, like I don't know, there were Rainbow Bright and Strawberry Shortcake and My Little Pony comics, and Barbie had comics, and Archie comics, which actually boys and girls liked. I read Archie comics, and I liked them, and my sister did too. To like the older superhero comics, sure, there were girl comics, there were superhero girl comics. They weren't, and the thing is, they weren't always the ones that had female characters in them. They were, there were girls that were really into the X-Men. And I think the reason why the girls were really into the X-Men, I can't really get into it, but I like in terms of the for sure the reasons. But I think the X-Men comics were appealing to girls because there was something. It was still kind of like a teenage type of story. Like there was a lot of angst and there was a lot of drama, and but the X-Men comics were really cool, and they had a mixture. It was kind of bohemian. It was kind of I don't know, like I think that the X-Men comics have always been appealing more so to women than say something like that was I don't know, I guess something like a Captain America comic or something. But
yeah, no, I mean the Japanese market is actually a lot bigger, which is I guess what happened when it was brought over. It was they realized there was actually a fairly large, much larger than it had been tapped before, market for comics for girls. But what's interesting is it came out of Japanese society, which is really resistant in a lot of ways to the social justice and feminist stuff. So instead of taking a page from that, they just went totally full bore on this, and the expectation that girls are going to buy this shit. And they don't. And actually, as schlocky and ridiculous as the stuff coming out of Japan is for girls, I am so glad that they would rather that than this.
And when we talk about the Japanese girl comics, you're talking about like the magical girl stuff, like Sailor Moon, and the romance comics, like Fruits Basket,
and Slice of Life,
stuff,
and also the yaoi, of course, or yaoi, or however the hell you say it. And I think there's some stuff that's like Magical Girl Utena?
Yeah. Oh, I know who you're talking about. That was...
Yeah, and all of that. But, it's like that stuff as it doesn't necessarily appeal to me because I like stuff a lot more gritty and action-orientated, but not too much because you can go too far in that direction. But at least it's, there's characterization, there's plot, there's some action... and it's not preaching. Yeah. It's just well done. And for what it is, it's well done. It might not appeal to me, but I can see that it's well done. This is just terrible writing. Just terrible. Just really, really, and so disrespectful to the character as you have described.
Oh, yeah. They're completely rewriting her to fit the narrative they think that she should have. Or... what I ultimately believe is that the person who got this job knew nothing about Mockingbird. They were just like, start writing this Mockingbird comic. Well, what can you tell me about her? What does she do? Well, she doesn't have powers. She's just like, she's just like a super trained, fighter and stuff. And she's really good. But that statement on its own should suggest, holy shit, she's been able to be on this team of superpowered heroes for 50 years with no powers, and she doesn't have a problem with that. That's awesome. But no, this person's like, well, she doesn't have powers. Well, I got to focus on that part. Well, why? You know, like there's lots of characters that don't have powers.
Yeah, why?
So
Well, here's a this is just a remark on the art, which is, you know, it's good. I'm getting a little tired of this kind of, you know, rip off of Gustav Klimt, or this rip off of Art Nouveau type style. But the hair in the panel with the spider bites is noticeably thicker than the hair in the panel with the Equal Rights Amendment signs, and that's just, you know, something about her character design between those two panels bugged the hell out of me, and it took me a while to figure out what
it's
it was.
the braids.
And that is it.
The braids go from really thick to sort of probably more like what they would look like. It was almost like the artists realized their mistake. And yeah, I am also getting, that seems to be a thing that I noticed with when I was in art school. There were first off, in art school, which I just graduated, I walk like next month, but there were more girls than boys in the class. Like there was probably more men than women, I would imagine, or more women than men is what I mean. So it was probably like, you know, 75% women in the class, and the 25% men. And the men and some of the women, they didn't even know that this is what they wanted. So ended up being that very few actually ended up graduating compared to how many started. And on top of that, it was still a majority of women. And all the women, I mean all of them, wanted to do this kind of Art Nouveau style. Like that was, they were in love with it. And I guess it was just like, it's just all over Tumblr, like the way that people draw, at least for them, that were the people that they followed. So these kind of like hard, thick outlines, you know, with these, the way that they draw like the hair and stuff, and that's taken right out of, oh God, what is that guy's name? It's not Gustav Klimt. The other one.
Toulouse-Lautrec?
No. That guy's post impressionist. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not talking about Toulouse. The guy who everyone. Oh gosh, I can't believe I can't remember.
Okay, just give me a second.
Yeah.
He was in the Art Nouveau style.
Oh yeah, he basically is. He's the guy people think of when you think of Art Nouveau. He's.
Oh yes, his name is right on.
Yeah, he does. He did ads, and he has a lot of his figures are, you know, women, and they're very Romanesque, and they have like robes, and he's all big up.
Alphonse Mucha.
Alphonse Mucha. That's it.
Mucha. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. So and they're all in love with Alphonse Mucha. And we went and saw here at the Art Institute. You can look at his prints, and they are very gorgeous, and I like him too. But it's basically like I'm overexposed and I'm getting sick of it, you know. So yeah, I mean that's basically where I'm at. It's like, okay, can we see something different? I actually think Lautrec I actually like more, even though his
I actually like Gustav Klimt more, and part of the reason why is I find that Alphonse Mucha and Mucha.
Well, it looks like it's Mucha or Mucha,
okay,
but it's pronounced Mucha.
The last time I heard it pronounced was like 10 years ago. So, and I'm terrible with pronouncing names at the best of times. But what I liked about Gustav Klimt and Lautrec is just the motion. Not so much in Gustav Klimt, but the motion in Lautrec is really good.
Yes.
In Gustav Klimt, I liked how he would compose figures together. Like, for example, the kiss, you could sort of feel the passion in that because of the way that the figures were composed together. With Alphonse Mucha, in particular, the people who just basically rip him off and create subpar, you know, I mean, it's tolerable. It's adequate art.
Yeah. But
it's still a ripoff of someone else's style. Like, you never really get a sense so much that the figures, that the characters, you don't see the power of the interaction between two characters. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just the power of the movements coming together.
Klimt has this thing where the characters look like they're interlocked. Like they fit together, you know, like in a way that's like a puzzle piece. And even if it looks like even if you think it looks a little anatomically awkward or whatever, the characters are a little elongated, but you forget about that right away because he locks them in. They look like they're embracing, like it looks, there is an energy there that is really well done, and
it's absent in a lot of the stuff that's based on Alphonse
Mucha.
Mucha.
Well, Mucha does, again, it's very beautiful figures and everything, but it's all, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's very academic. Like you can tell that it's just like, it's well done, it's well made, it's academic, it's but one of the things that I like about Toulouse-Lautrec, and then I guess we can move on. One of my favorite paintings by Lautrec is it's one of his Night at the Moulin Rouge paintings, but it's not the one that a lot of people think of, where there's that scary woman in the lower corner, with the blue face. It's another one that's from a different angle, but it's still at the Moulin Rouge, and it's basically, there's a bar shot, and there's these people sitting at the bar, and there's a woman and a man, I believe, and it moves sort of in the background, and in the background there's a crowd standing around, and that painting is very large, and it's at the Art Institute here. And if you go to see the painting itself, and you look at the crowd, Toulouse-Lautrec has this thing where, even though the paint is just slapped on, you could tell, I mean, it looks like it's random, but it's clearly not. It's planned. He knows where he's putting his strokes. But what really stands out is the way in which he manages to use as few lines as possible to establish that there is a figure there, and that every figure, every man and woman in that crowd is completely unique, and you can tell that that's probably a lot like what they look like, even though his style is a bit caricature-ish, like you could see that he exaggerates for effect, but you can see every person there is an individual, and that's something that I want to achieve. I think that's very difficult to draw several male and female figures and have all of them look like individual persons, instead of, say, what a lot of artists do, especially comic artists. And I know that this is for expediency, so I'm not criticizing them. They basically make men and women look the same because it's easier, especially when you have to pump out 30 pages in a month. I can understand why you don't really have a lot of time to try to come up with ways. But there are some guys and gals that can do it. It's just difficult. But Lautrec he does that, and it's very impressive. So
yeah, and if you look at the back of the ERA panel, I mean, and I understand, like you said, this is probably somebody who has to get a lot of artwork out the door, but there's no personality to the people in the crowd.
No, they look angry.
There's just, maybe a little. They don't even look like they're real. They just look like props, like and that's part of the problem that I have with the artwork based on Mucha.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so stiff, and it doesn't. There's another comic book called Saga that maybe one day we'll cover here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at the artwork, and for example, there's a lot of sex in that comic, none of which is at all passionate. Like if it doesn't even it doesn't, like a previous show Karen was talking about doing her Trump Bernie slash, and I've already masturbated to. If it doesn't actually give you that kind of a heat, it's why even draw it? And the problem with Saga is all the sex is done in this very Mucha style, and all of the figures are so isolated, and sex by definition is not isolated.
Yeah.
It's the heat is in the interaction between the two characters, and it feels like they're just paper dolls laid on top of each other.
Mm.
And it's like the person who drew this, which was a woman who was no doubt just like all the women influenced by Mucha, it didn't look like she started by sketching how the bodies would connect together. She started simply by sketching the characters in two different plausibly related poses. And it's just like, yeah, this is about as hot as a clinical drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, no.
As hot as this X-ray. Yeah.
As hot as that X-ray. And about as intelligible. Okay.
With her
So,
gajillion ribs.
Gajillion ribs, yes.
Ribs.
Me and my multiple. That's her superpower, multiple ribs. ribs like a fence.
Yeah, it does. It looks like a fence. All right, let's move on to the next panel. So speaking of the ERA, all right. So in the next panel, we're still talking about everything that she could do to get superpowers. So if she tried radiation exposure.
Okay, Brian, stop putting it up and down like that. You're making me sick.
All right, sorry. Arachnoid farming, and then archaeology. And in this next panel, you have Bobby as a little girl trying to talk to, I guess, her mother. And she's saying, can we get a backhoe so I can find a magical amulet? And her mother's saying, as soon as I get paid as much as your father. And so apparently Bobby's mom was a feminist, and she was looking to get her equal pay, her equal rights amendments set. And they're establishing that. So now, of course...
Okay, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 is a United States federal law amending the Fair Labor Standards Act aimed at abolishing wage disparity based on sex. So, okay, and the ERA, just getting a little bit of... the ERA amendment, it was introduced in 1923 in Congress for the first time, but it was scuppered sometime in the... it was in the 70s that occurred. So why was she talking about equal pay when the Fairness Act was already, the Equal Pay Act was already, like if they're talking about the ERA, all of the controversy seems to have been in the late 70s, whereas the Equal Pay Act was passed in the early 60s. So do these people not even frickin' know the history of their own movement?
Well, I don't know. Is this supposed to take place in the early 60s?
Well, if it takes place in the early 60s, they wouldn't have been referencing the controversy around the ERA, because that happened. Okay, in 1972, it passed both houses of Congress and was submitted to the state legislatures for ratification. Okay, so most of the ERA stuff took place in the 70s, whereas the Equal Pay Act took place in the 60s. So if this is about the... Oh,
so what you're saying is the ERA thing, it's not related to the desire to get paid as much as the father. These things don't make sense together.
Well, not when it comes to the Equal Pay Act that established that nobody should be discriminated based on sex. If she's referring to being discriminated based on sex, she's talking about the Equal Pay Act, which had already passed probably at least 15 years before the ERA was under serious discussion, and all the controversy with Phyllis Schlafly and all of the stuff happened. And so none of this panel makes any logical sense.
Unless
her style is not 70s. It's maybe 60s is maybe pushing it. And she wouldn't be talking about equal pay. She would be talking about some other aspect of the ERA. Yeah. So, I don't know. Where are you going with
I
this?
can't determine based on what I'm looking at what time period it is. I mean, she's got a headband and some, like a go-go dress. It could be the 70s, like the early 70s. But one thing that could be going on here is that unintentionally, by the author, is that they're showing that despite the fact that the Equal Pay Act had passed, women were still being told that they weren't getting paid equally, and sort of like today. So maybe her mom is completely has her facts wrong because feminists gave her the wrong facts, and they're saying that even though the Equal Pay Act was passed, she's still not getting paid the same as a man, which is a myth that's been perpetuated to this very day. And so her mom is just repeating the same, misinformation, and doesn't realize that if it was even needed when it was originally passed, an act was passed already. So,
incidentally, we support the Equal Rights Amendment. At least I do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think there should be absolutely equal rights between men and women. And I think that Phyllis Schlafly, one of the main reasons why she opposed it was because she thought it would get rid of the obligation for married men to support their wives financially. which is incidentally really related to this whole issue of her getting paid as much as her father or her husband. Well, the thing is that at that time, if it took place in the 60s, I believe it was illegal for her husband to not pay for her living.
Mm-hmm.
So he could go to jail if he could not afford her. And now I'm just getting really freaked out by that goddamn hairband and ear combination. Seriously? I just realized how bad that is.
Oh, yeah, what?
Or does she not have ears?
No,
Are her
they're like,
ears attached to the headband?
No, she's got the kind of ears that are on the side of your head and point forward. They're like satellite dishes.
Oh my, not just that, but somehow the headband, which looks like a cloth headband, like her ears are attached to the headband.
Okay. I know what they were trying to do, but
they failed.
No, they failed because the round. Okay, so let's say her head. All right, and this is just getting into art critique, but okay, here's Bobby. She's looking sideways. That's where the ear should be. That's about what it should look like. Although her neck is a bit thick, but that's okay. Here's her mom. Her mom's head looks like it's supposed to be turned away from us slightly more so. Like it's, we're looking at more like a 3/4 almost view with the back of her head, but slightly in profile so that we can still see like part of the eye. But there are some really big mistakes here. One is that this hairband should be curved this way. It should be curved so that we know that it's wrapping around her head. You see that? But instead it's just going up and down, which implies profile like this. That's when you're doing profile, you draw it that way. But it should be sort of like, going around the curvature
curving
of her,
over the shape of her
yeah,
skull.
It should be curving around her skull so that we're looking more of the back of her head. And her hair is even suggesting that too, because she has kind of a bob, like a Mary Tyler Moore thing that curls right here. You should be able to see a little bit of this side. Sure. Okay. Another thing that's wrong is that appears to be an eyelash from her other eye, from the right eye. You should not be able to see that at all. But that's the really big mistake. So yeah, her head is wrong.
Her head is completely fucked up.
Yeah. And then like her boob is like going all the way up here. Like it should be like a little bit lower. Like down there.
And yeah, you shouldn't be able to see that much roundness from that angle. Yeah. This is like, Jesus. The more I look at this art, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
All
right. Well, anyway, so yeah, ERA, so she wants to get into archaeology. Now let's move on to the next one. I invented a laser helmet. My teacher was unimpressed.
Okay, way to go with the mammy racial stereotype.
Yeah. Get back.
And in a home economics teacher, too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The home ec teacher says, get back to your muffin project, Miss Morse. And she's whining, but it's rechargeable.
Oh my fucking... Why would you have a mammy stereotype for a home economics teacher? And why would she call her Miss Morse and not by her first name like every teacher I've ever had in school? Never referred to me as Miss Morse. Or Miss Tieman, sorry.
Well, hopefully not Miss Morse.
Yeah.
So they're doing another thing here too. Well, there's a couple things going on. First off, it doesn't make sense that she would bring a laser helmet to her home ec class. But I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to set up this thing where this girl is trying to break out of her, apparently preordained gender norm life that is set up from the beginning as some sort of like, impossible thread of fate that she can't escape, from going from being born a girl to her mom's problems as sort of a predictor of the future, her mother's issues.
Yeah, her mom's problems being a wife whose husband is legally obligated to make sure that she is maintained in the comfort of the lifestyle she has come accustomed to. And the funny thing is that feminists never follow that to its logical conclusion. If in that time period men legally were obligated to take care of their wives and their families, a lot of the so-called discrimination was simply due to that factor. Because when they never reference the discrimination against bachelor men. Like bachelor men were fired first and hired last because they had nobody to take care of but themselves. And they never referenced that discrimination, and they never contextualized the fact that women were paid less, but women didn't have the same legal obligations to financially take care of their families.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was I don't want to call it discrimination against women working, because if you look at other societies where there were groups of people who were expected to support themselves and other people, by the government essentially said these groups of people, yeah, your wages are to go not just to support yourself, but also this other group of people. And I'll leave it to the exercise of the viewer what that group of people who were expected by the government to put their wages towards the support of other people were called. But throughout history, there have been those groups who were expected by the government to pay their wages to another group. And men were part of that group. And the groups that expected to get wages paid to them often had experienced discrimination in the labor force. They were often denied the opportunity to have the same jobs. And you know what? I'll give an example. Free Roman citizens in the Roman Empire could only take 2 jobs. Well, male citizens anyway. The females were, could take as many as they want. But they could be farmers or soldiers. Whereas slaves could take any job, pretty much any job they wanted, including what we would consider white-collar jobs now. But they were still obligated by the state to give at least part of their wages to their slave owners. And if you're going to present that this kind of disenfranchisement of Roman citizens by not being allowed to take certain jobs, and probably not being paid as much when they did, relative to the slaves that they owned, that's not going to really fly. And I'm not saying that men are slaves, but I'm saying that if your argument for disenfranchisement equally applies to the slave owners of Rome, it probably is not a very good argument.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, this woman apparently wants to be paid equally to her husband, but not have the same obligation to pay for him should he require her to keep him in the lifestyle to which he's become accustomed. Anyway, continue.
All right. So she invented a laser helmet. Her teacher was not impressed. And all right, just to point out that a laser helmet, that's a big deal, and the fact that her teacher was unimpressed makes no sense to me. I just don't get that at all. And I don't even think Tony Stark was doing shit like this when he was her age. So she's basically pulling off like technological wonders that contemporaries that could not do at that age. They weren't even to do until much later, in fact.
Where's the power source?
I don't know. It's
like, seriously, if she manages to get something that can power a laser on someone's head, mm-hmm. a power source that's light enough that she's not like, it's not like half a ton.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty impressive. She could basically create with that kind of a power source, she probably could have her own line of electric cars that run 500 miles on a single battery.
Yeah, but apparently,
I'm wondering,
when this home ec teacher said, "Get back to your muffin project," she just gave up on technology altogether because she never did anything after that. That was enough to completely kill her dreams. Completely.
Okay, so seriously, she invented something, a form of and it's not even the laser that's impressive. It's the fact that she's created a battery that apparently is light enough to power a laser. And part of the reason why lasers are so difficult, like we don't use them as weapons, is because they need so much fucking power. She managed to create a battery powerful enough, or with enough charge to power a laser, and that can be on a human's head, and at the age of what? I'm guessing 12?
Mm-hmm.
Do these people not even freaking know, like, I don't even know that much about laser science, and I know that that's freaking incredible.
Yeah.
Like, that has incredible implications for not just lasers, but just, like, power. Anything that requires electrical power, anywhere, anytime. She's essentially invented the world's greatest battery. And how? Did she do it in a home ec class with, like, bacon grease and flour? Like, or did you just slap this in here because just like you have the person who wrote this apparently has no knowledge of the feminist movement or feminist, or the history of the ERA, or the history of the Equal Pay Act, or the history of even law, so that you can contextualize all of this stuff. This person who wrote this apparently does not understand science either.
No.
Does not science either.
But she put a pie on her shirt, so totally gets science. See? Pie.
So she's...
That's like, I know, that's the laziest way of doing science stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
let's go on to the next one. Well, again, though, I've just to throw it in there, why would you bring your rechargeable laser helmet to home ec class? Also, real quick, when you're, like, I'm guessing this is middle school, home ec class, I never took one. And as far as I knew, at least maybe in public schools, it didn't exist. But maybe that's just because I'm from Chicago. We don't have that here. Is that something that you choose to take, or is that something that was mandatory? Because that's something that I don't get, you know.
Well, I think it was mandatory. Everyone took it. And when I went to home ec in like the late 80s, boys and girls took it. They were considered life skills. There was also a shop class that I took, but it was only me and a bunch of boys. I think that was optional, and no girls actually went in it.
Okay, because
so essentially they're appropriating whoever wrote this shitty comic is appropriating my. I know that there's multiple genders, so I guess you could call it a gender identity as a tom girl or tomboy.
Well, because if I go
and writing it completely wrong, incidentally, you are completely and utterly wrong.
Well, if I go back to a panel here to the ERA, we know that her mom is a feminist. Why would her mom allow her to take a home ec course, or at least not make sure that her daughter, who appears to have an interest in science enough to build a laser helmet, put her in a shop class? Like, why would her mom not do that and be a feminist at the same time? That doesn't make sense.
Well, why wouldn't she be agitating for her to be in the shop class instead?
Yeah.
And it almost sounds like the implication actually that they're giving, and I know they're not intending this, is that mom is actually so involved in her feminist causes that she doesn't have really much time to actually pay attention to her daughter and her interests, which I guess could be referencing which was that there was a recent feminist daughter who said basically the same thing about her mother, that her mother was incredibly neglectful because feminism was more important than raising a balanced, healthy daughter. Yeah. So it could be a little bit of a poke to that. I really doubt it.
No, it was
I really
not.
doubt they're trying to make that implication. But yeah,
because the way you have to look at this would be that every woman in this is a victim of something. They're not able to help each other because they're going through their own shit. So her mom we can't be less sympathetic to the mom because her mom appears to be neglecting Bobby, because the mom is going through a bunch of stuff too, because she's not getting paid as much as her father is because ERA and all that. So it's not her problem. And then the home ec teacher, who's a black woman, she probably has no choice but to do home ec because that's where the men put her. Like, she could have taught something else, but no, they wouldn't let her because the patriarchy. They made her put on an apron and teach people how to bake or whatever it is. She didn't have a choice.
Like cooking is like so
yeah,
so fundamentally inferior.
Yeah.
No, actually, cooking is the basics of it's the basics of life. It keeps people alive, and also, if you think about it, cooking is the basis of domestication of other animals. Because or food service. Because that's how we domesticate all the animals that actually got us to this point. Because we basically used animal technology before we had machines. So it's actually a very powerful art.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's such an incredibly powerful thing that we often have to pretend that other things are more powerful just to equalize it with the art and act of cooking and providing food. That's the basis of domestication. And the basis of domestication is the basis of an agricultural society. So, maybe you shouldn't be dissing the cooking or feminists.
Yeah. Look, by the way, I just found another horrific anatomical issue, at least to me. Look at this arm. Look at that shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
It's like, okay, guys, you really need to go back to your anatomy. But you know, like maybe the art was really rushed, because I see some of the same issues in my art occasionally.
But I don't know what's going on there though. That sleeve should be down here, like this.
Yeah, the sleeve should be down, and the shoulder. It's
like,
just,
is this her armpit?
in the length
that
of her.
doesn't, like, what's going on there? Does she have like some kind of spinal condition that, like, makes her shoulders cave forward, like Shannon? Like, is it? No. Okay.
Okay, and why is it when she's 12 her arms are skinnier?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, let's
next panel.
Continue.
All right, so here's Bobby on the phone, and she's saying she's on the phone with Oscorp. Hello, Oscorp. I was wondering if you had any human experimental trials starting over summer break. They did, but my parents wouldn't sign the forms. All right, so that's sort of like an inside Marvel joke. The Oscorp is the company that was owned by Norman Osborn, who was the Green Goblin, but he also performed, they sort of retconned it to where, like, a lot of the Spider-Man villains who are based on animals, like the Rhino, the Vulture, Dr. Octopus, etc., were all, like, either Oscorp employees or somehow connected, so...
Is this meta? Like they're trying to say, oh yeah, having superpowers is a men's role?
Oh yeah. Well, maybe, maybe. It seems like she's...
Okay, let's see all the evidence.
She's thwarted at every turn trying to get powers, because that's so important. So her parents wouldn't sign the form. That's probably a good thing, Bobby, because...
Okay, and incidentally, as the group of people being depicted very poorly in this comic, if a teacher had told me, get what the fuck is with this laser helmet, why would I give a shit?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless I required the home economics kitchen, which was a crappy kitchen, by the way, to create my laser helmet, why would I care if the home economics teacher was unimpressed? It's like, when you're iconoclastic and pursue shit that nobody really either gives a shit about or really, really hates, you don't care about their opinion. That this is part of the problem with this whole comic.
Mm-hmm.
This girl is constantly seeking out other people's opinions for what she's doing, which is a very female thing. It is. This is the thought. This is basically displaying the thought patterns of the author.
We're not ever gonna know what it's like to have unlimited power.
Yeah, exactly. It's so freaking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that the author just wrote that in, probably didn't even realize what she got this, I don't know, 12-year-old girl to invent. And just for a throwaway joke. Well, maybe they just don't really give a shit that much about this particular storyline to make it actually consistent and make it make sense and make it have some sort of like relationship to reality so we can have it to be believable. But regardless, so it's like she's invented this amazing technology, this battery that's tiny and can actually run a portable laser. But it's the home ec teacher's opinion that really prevented her. I guess this is what they really think keeps women out of STEM. Mm-hmm. Is just the opinion of home ec teachers. And why would she even care? Like, speaking as a girl or a woman who was a tomboy and was iconoclastic enough to potentially have invented something interesting like that, I wouldn't have given a shit about my teacher's opinions. And I never really gave too much. I never really cared about their opinions too much. Because the kind of person that could potentially do that kind of work, the kind of work that could invent a battery, and how the fuck did she invent this battery in the first place in home ec? Is it like made out of flour and bacon grease? That's another question. Did she do it in the home ec kitchen? Who knows? But regardless, if she invented this thing, if she's the kind of person who would do something like that, that kind of person is not going to be dissuaded by someone's opinion on the matter.
Yeah.
It's just not that's not. It doesn't. But like I said, this is the thinking of the women who get involved in feminism and write shit like this. They honest to God, think that other people's opinions matter this much, and they're promoting girls thinking that other people's opinions matter this much.
Yeah, there's a lot of insecurity.
Yeah,
it's coming out in this story. Just this one page. We're not even done with the first page yet. And
yeah, it's like even what should the home? I mean, men have created these revolutions in scientific thinking, and the it wasn't even just that people thought they were idiots or thought they were crazy. People thought they were seditious and heretical and poured molten lead up their anuses, and yet they still did it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that one home ec teacher said was dismissive of this girl models a femininity so fragile that why are feminists not put to task for creating this image of fragile femininity? Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Feminists are not iconoclasts.
No, they're
the
not.
Opposite of that, I think.
So, yeah, why do you think that big government, big business, and big academia all supports feminism?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody loves a woman who plays a victim. Because that's the right role that women should occupy. Anyway, continue.
And then in the last panel, in this first page, oh no, this isn't the last panel, this is just the next panel. She says, 57 X-rays and I still wasn't radioactive. So she's still getting free X-rays, apparently in her house, because this is like somebody's house wallpaper. I don't know.
What frickin' doctor is giving you 57 X-rays for no reason? You don't even look like you have a broken bone.
Yeah.
Do these people have absolutely no desire for proper craft? And incidentally, the top of her shoulder bone should be actually closer to the top of the X-ray there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it that's ridiculous.
This is the bony landmark right up here.
Yeah, that's where the bone should be.
But
and people won't be able to see your laser pointer thing, but essentially, if you look at the panel where she's got her arm up in an L shape, the bone is about it should be right up at where the edge of the skin is.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's a joint. The joints are where the bones are closest to the skin. So another anatomical error.
Yeah.
But let's.
There was something I was thinking about. I don't know if a man or a woman wrote this book because I couldn't find the source book. I was trying to, and like if this is a Mockingbird comic, which I think it is, it's behind a paywall at the Marvel website, and I wasn't willing to pay to get access to this book. No way. So I don't know if a man wrote it or a woman wrote it. I don't even know what issue it is. So if anybody knows, you can just let us know. But that's sort of neither here nor there. But one of the things I was thinking about as we were reading this is the bit that really bugs me. This book appears to have been made to be marketed towards girl readers or women readers. Okay, but it's marketed towards women readers that apparently share or have all of these insecurities. Not the kinds of... Because somebody like you, Alison, would not like to read this book. And this book isn't for men. Like, it's clearly not trying to be for men, as we're going to find out as we move forward. Or boys, right? So who is it for? So, I mean, is it for... That's probably why the science for this laser helmet and all this is lazy. You know, there's inconsistencies with the ERA bit, the Ms. Magazine thing, the Spider-Man thing. All these things are wrong or poorly done. Because I think that the audience is essentially the same kind of people who are writing it. The people who are writing this are writing it for people like them, you know.
For artists. It's art for artists. It's comics for... Actually, it's not even comics for comics creators.
Not.
It's just... It is... I don't know what it is. It's just basically like a propaganda piece,
and the thing is, these people think that this is what girls want. This is the thing. That's the part that really gets me. These people think that they have nailed what girls want to read in their comics. And yeah, there are probably girls that did read this and they do like this. And if you look at the comments section, you can see a couple. We can look at that later. You can see a couple at the very bottom that are like, "Oh, we need more stuff like this. I like that. I like what I'm seeing." But the overwhelming majority of people, men and women, are like, this is just ham-fisted, pathetic, annoying shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, it's basically all it is if they took this Mockingbird character and then just made her a fashion model wearing clothing instead of a superhero, that's essentially what they've done, is that they've turned a superhero into a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And they've expected us to be like, oh yeah, this is empowerment. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's empowerment according to your definition of empowerment, which is so entrenched in the idea of victimhood. The idea that you have to be a victim, or you have to be perceived to be owed in order to have power, because your only power is in dictating what other people do, specifically men, what men are supposed to do to give you reparations for your victimhood, instead of recognizing your own power as a person, an individual.
But this is why I think that what I wanted to point out, because I'm sure that we have really spurred over every single panel and looked and discussed each one in great detail. And there are probably people who are thinking, well, you guys are really reading into this too much, or looking at this, maybe you're like getting a little too out of hand or whatever with this. But the reason why is to let you guys know that the people who are making this is what they think of women. They're showing us what they think of women that would read comics. They're showing us what they think comics aimed at girls, or even just comics that feature girls, should have in order to be considered good progressive comic book material. This is what they think it should have. And that means it says what they believe, their thoughts on women is. That's completely different from boys. Which is crazy, considering that, feminism makes the declaration that boys and girls are completely equal and the same, and that everything that they, do is just learned or socialized behavior, and that there's no differences between them.
If boys and girls are the same, when does, teaching girls the feminist victim consciousness, when does it become, in and of itself, its own perpetuation of gender roles?
Oh, from the beginning.
Well, the thing is that if there is no exit strategy for feminism, if there's no objective point at which feminists say, hey, yeah, we've achieved equality, then how do we know we aren't teaching girls victim consciousness, which is in and of itself its own form of a socialized social role that's negative for women, and there's no reason for it. The assumption here is that women will never achieve equality. Well, that's patently nonsense. So when does it become incorrect to teach girls to regard themselves as victims?
Well,
if you don't have an objective measure of equality.
Yeah.
And you won't ever measure the male side.
Well, feminism needs women as victims, otherwise it doesn't have a purpose to exist. So.
Yeah, but you won't ever measure the male side, so how do you ever know when objectively equality is reached, and know when teaching girls to assume the submissive posture of victims is actually detrimental to them? So it's all there's no exit strategy for feminism. And the other thing is, I'm finding this meek look on Mockingbird's face to be really Mockingbird's face to be really obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me want to punch her.
Oh yeah, no, she's going from confident little tom girl to, over time, just a shattered, hopeless tween that just couldn't make it. And we're about to find out why. This is going to get really good now.
Okay, well, so it hasn't even gotten good.
No, it's going to get better.
Oh,
this is where
God,
it goes way
myself
off the rails. And the people who made this not only do they not read comics, they don't like comics. All right, so next panel. 57 X-rays and I still wasn't radioactive. All right, so there's a shot of some superheroes: Human Torch, Submariner, Captain America, Thor, and Cyclops.
Wait. Somebody pointed out that when did Cyclops become Biclops?
Yeah, Biclops, I know, because the two slots. That's how you know.
Oh,
That's just one bit of evidence that lets you know the people who made this don't know comics.
They don't have a fucking clue about comics.
That should have just been one thing. I know. I just
unbelievable.
God. And this is way off. Like, this X isn't centered. Like, the chest is right here, dude. You know, whoever drew that. But anyway,
that's just crappy art. That isn't necessarily
like, Thor's
complete
face is really derpy. All right, so it says, I finally realized that I was being unrealistic. I could never be like my heroes. They all had something that I didn't. A Y chromosome. Honestly, by then I had other things on my mind. Like most girls my age, I was obsessed with. Okay, so I'm not gonna go on to the next page.
Let's discuss this.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
The feminists who wrote this, what they don't realize is the genre is about a fantasy in which you have incredible agency, and they are trying to inject their worldview in which women have no agency, and it creates the most god awful. It's god awful. It's like going into the romance genre and saying, you know what romance really needs? Step by step instructions on how to replace the oil in your car. Like, it's so ridiculous.
I thought you were going to say step by step, request for consent every step of the way.
Well, yeah, that too. But in this case, I'm saying that what they're trying to do is they're trying to smash two things together that are almost complete fucking opposites. So if you went to the erotica genre and changed it and switched out, say, you know what erotica really needs? It really needs highly detailed instructions on how to rebuild your engines instead of sex scenes. Because engine rebuilding is just the same as sex, right? Because you got parts going into parts. And nobody's saying, no, actually, you're not getting the point. No one is telling the people writing this, the feminists writing this, that you are not getting the point of these comics. These comics are about celebrating inhuman levels of agency. And you are trying to create female characters that are defined by a complete lack of agency.
Yeah.
Complete lack of it. And you are now making, and I realized that I had the sense that this was going to go meta. You are making Mockingbird, or you're saying that girls are a victim of the comic book industry itself. Because the comic book industry doesn't let girls be superpowered. That's the conversation that's having here. This isn't even about a story. It's about a condemnation of the industry.
Absolutely. And it's wrong.
And they're using a character. They're using a female character just to be like a puppet in their goddamn their chick track.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say that it's completely inaccurate anyway. Because there were female superheroes shortly after there were male ones. There were female pulp heroes before there were superheroes. Like in the days of the Shadow and shit. There were female heroes probably going back as far as, as what we were talking about earlier, like ancient Greece and in Japan and in, stories from all parts of the world, in our mythology. But no, they never existed. Even though essentially superheroes represent a sort of modern mythology in many ways. But, obviously not like the gods. It's just a whole different thing. But there have always been female characters. This whole idea that, the thing that I could never be like them because I didn't have a Y chromosome is ridiculous, patently. Absolutely. In the Marvel Universe, some of the most powerful characters are female. Wasp led the Avengers for a long while. There was a female Captain Marvel that also led the Avengers. The Fantastic Four's most powerful member is Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. The X-Men's most powerful member is the Phoenix, a woman. The Storm led the X-Men. This is ridiculous. This idea that's not, that was the ability to have power is some man thing. Now, if she's confusing having superpowers with having agency, then Alison, you're spot on, because that wouldn't work with their narrative. Because yes, that's what superhero stories are. It's about having, as you were saying, all of this power or agency over yourself, but also using it despite temptation to use it selfishly, using it selflessly to make sacrifices to help other people, and also be an example, And it's not about it was never about representing a men, like no male superheroes never did anything because they were doing it for men. There's no such thing as a male superhero says, I'm doing this for the men everywhere. That doesn't exist. But with female characters in their stories, at least people who write like this, they'll say this is for women everywhere, which is really odd. Men generally do everything for the betterment of everybody. I don't know. I'm that's a bit off the mark, but it's something.
Yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is this is creepy as hell.
Yeah.
Because you're taking a female character and her ultimate conclusion is this victim consciousness shit. So this is essentially a document selling victim consciousness for girls. And
it's wrapped up in a superhero comic. Which is the opposite of what it should do.
Which is the exact opposite, which is why I'm saying we're dealing with a group of people. And it's more sinister than a group of mechanics who think that erotica just needs really elaborate, detailed descriptions of rebuilding engines instead of sex scenes. Because that's just ridiculous, and most mechanics don't want to take over the world and turn girls into victimhood consciousness zombies. But it's just as silly. If you take out all of the sinister aspects, all of the let's teach girls let's teach girls this victimhood consciousness that will make them think they can't do a damn thing, and then when they don't do a damn thing, we'll blame it on patriarchy. That's the ticket. If you get rid of that sinister aspect, it is just as absurd as the mechanics wanting to take over erotica.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Let's move on.
Yeah. Oh, some anatomical issues I noticed. Cyclops. You see Cyclops' face here? What's this blue bit by his cheek? What is that? Is that supposed to be the mask?
I think that's supposed to be his...
Because...
I think that's his jaw.
Do you see that?
It's really bad.
That might be miscolored.
Yeah, I do see that. Yeah, I think it's miscolored.
Yeah, that's...
It's so sloppy.
So off.
Well, I've miscolored.
And why do they look
too,
so uninterested in what they're doing? Like, they don't look happy at all. I mean, not happy, but look at Human Torch. He's like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't want to do this. These expressions, jeez, guys. Oh, I don't even get it.
Who farted in the elevator?
Yeah. So this person did not want to draw those men, is what I'm noticing. Because she gets, even though her anatomy has problems, she gets more energized when she draws women. They get expressive and shit. So, all right. So,
okay, how did we?
What was that?
Okay, how did we get to this next page?
All right, there's a setup.
Did we just miss a page?
So down here it says, they all had something I didn't. A Y chromosome. Honestly, by then I had other things on my mind. Like most girls my age, I was obsessed with math and science. Most girls my age.
No, I've gone through high school and most girls were not obsessed with math and science. In fact, most boys weren't either. Most girls are obsessed with either the beauty ideal or the victimhood ideal,
or both,
because those are the two main roles that girls and women occupy: is being attractive or being a victim.
Do you think that it's there's a chance that one of the reasons why the person decided to write that I was interested in the same thing that most girls my age were, which is math and science, was a way of trying to convince readers that girls are actually interested in math and science despite evidence to the contrary? Like it's sort of like lying to them, like saying, "Oh yeah, most girls like math and science. This is I'm saying this to you in the hopes that you will also end up liking math and science." Because
the tension lines on her clothing are all wrong.
Oh yeah. Well, especially the one by her armpit.
Yeah, it looks like there's a hollow that's ridiculous. Anyway, I'll ignore that for now. Yeah, they probably are trying to say that, even though it's patently. I mean, not every boy has to be told every boy is interested in math and science to have an interest in math and science.
Right.
They just have to not care about other people's opinions of them, because boys who have an interest in math and science are also stigmatized.
Yeah.
Are probably even more stigmatized than girls who are interested in it. You know, they're called nerds and antisocial and spurg lords and other shit. You know, they're insulted for having that interest. But the difference is we don't tell boys that being insulted should be the end of your life and you become a victim and you're incapable of saying, you know what, I don't fucking give a shit about other people's opinions. I'm going to do what I want. We tell that to girls. We tell girls, and this is what's so fucked up about this. We tell girls that other people's opinions determine what they're capable of doing. We tell them that. Feminists tell girls that shit instead of saying, you know what, who cares? People can have their opinions. It doesn't matter. You do what you want. But feminists essentially tell girls that people's opinions stop them from doing things.
Yeah.
And that's fucked up. And no, girls don't need to be told that all girls go into math and science. They just need to be told, do what you want. Don't give a shit about other people's opinions. And and even further, more than other people's opinions don't matter. If you give in to other people's opinions, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Mm-hmm. There is nobody, no patriarchy, no male privilege that you can blame if you choose to abdicate the interest that you have in favor of appealing to people's opinions of you. That is your choice and your fault. Mm-hmm. Grow up. Ladies, grow up, girls. You chose, your guidance counselor in high school said, well, women shouldn't go into math, and you chose not to go into math. Your choice and your fault. No one to blame but yourself.
This idea that you can simply say, well, you know, lie to women or girls that might read this book and say that most girls are interested in math and science, therefore, you know, if you have an interest in math and science, you're secretly like most girls, even though the evidence is that's just not true, probably comes from the same mentality that believes that these kinds of media will have that kind of profound effect on the reader. So they can just tell them something and they would just believe it. That's why people say, oh, media matters, representation matters. Video games cause violence because, you know, they do. Video games cause sexism. Movies change people's opinions. Representation of you know, various sexual orientations matter because they let people know that this thing is either approved or not approved. The acceptance thing is very important. But I think that the people who have actually made the biggest differences in science and in math and just like bettered, you know, made the world a better place were not the people who waited until they were told it was okay to take an interest in something. They just did it despite, you know, despite the normies saying that that's not okay or that they don't like it or that they're not interested in that thing. So I don't know what you guys are trying to get at here. Because if a girl has an interest in math and science and it's something that she really wants to do, a comic book that says that it's okay for her to do it is not going to change her mind if she's already got her mind set on it. And that's actually really, it's patronizing, you know?
Yeah, it is. These platelets are, so all the science that this girl did was in the context of her school?
Apparently. All aside from that laser helmet that
she
made, I guess. Unless that she did that in school too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like, that doesn't indicate that she has much of an interest in it.
No.
And where did she suddenly get glasses?
Well, also, her hair, is this girl on the left panel, is that supposed to be Bobby? Because it doesn't look like her at all. It's completely inconsistent. She has bangs, and her hair is brown. Or like a light brown.
And suddenly she just like different. Let's
so
keep
these
going.
platelets are amazing. Next panel, it says, "I'm still a scientist."
Said by nobody looking at platelets ever.
What?
Said by no one who ever looked at platelets
yeah, I was
ever.
just gonna say, I don't. Yeah, okay, whatever. I like how this class is full of girls all looking at platelets, because that totally happens.
And what the fuck is it? Why does the platelets have pom-poms?
All right, so she says, I'll just go back a bit. I'm still a scientist, but these days it's more of a hobby. And there's a picture of her doing action stuff, which is fine. I thought it was just interesting that she made time. I know she wanted to be a superhero and she was into science, so I guess it makes sense. Um,
Okay.
then in the what were you gonna say?
So, so she essentially became some kind of hero.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she, because she didn't become superpowered, that's a problem. I'm still a scientist. He said, okay, what's going on with the anatomy here? Why is her boob like? It, she looks like she's carrying like a rock on her chest or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. It's weird. It's like these kinds of people are always really concerned with anatomical, what they consider errors that over sexualize, but they don't have a problem with all manner of other anatomical errors. Only
Yeah,
the ones that make the women look too hot. Like
I
this,
don't know what's going on with her body there. She
this
just
hand looks wrong. The
the bicep
foreshortening is weird.
Yeah, the bicep is really wrong because
Yeah.
it should be wider, and her shoulder should be, because I mean, especially if she's athletic,
Yeah.
she should have pretty freaking. And the next scene, I don't know what's going on with the action. It doesn't feel real.
No,
and
this stuff is very dull. She just
and
shot a guy in the head. I don't know if it's like what.
she's a stone cold killer. All right.
Yeah, apparently.
And
That's
we
that's
don't
what
have
she
to-
wanted to do with her superhero powers: kill men. Apparently.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's like this is the thing. I mean, they talk about women are I don't know, some vague oppression, but what about the guys who are endlessly killed and we don't give a shit about because their purpose is to be killed in a comic to illustrate the badassedness of the hero. And incidentally, when did it start to be that this was just okay? You know, she just blows away a guy and it doesn't have any impact on her characterization. All we're supposed to think is, oh yeah, she's a badass. Not that she's actually a fucking killer. Because, you know, that is an issue in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently got a letter from a combat veteran. And he says that despite the fact that veterans are supposed to be given, you know, some preferential treatment because of what they've gone through. Not preferential treatment, but the fact that he was a combat veteran is a flag in his record, and he's discriminated against because of it, because there is a huge amount of stigma when it comes to people who are men specifically who go into battle and kill the enemy, engage the enemy, and are trained and go into battle and engage the enemy and kill them. That this is an issue. This is an aspect, and even though he did it in the context of the army, he's still judged for it. It's still supposed to impact how people see him. And yet this woman blowing away a man, no apparent context except that they all seem to be wearing uniforms and are apparently in some sort of mine.
Yeah. Oh, maybe a submarine or something. And they don't appear to be armed, except this guy looks like he has a stick.
Yeah, like
So
she's
it looks like she's just executing people. Like I don't have any reason to think otherwise. I don't know what's going on, but
yeah, she's just basically executing a bunch of guys who are coming after her with a stick and possibly a mop. Like she's executing the janitorial staff in some sort of underground something or other. You know,
Yeah.
like it's like this is, but we're not supposed to be like, wow, this is a stone cold fucking killer. And she seems to be still brooding over having her home ec teacher tell her.
the weird thing is that comics, these kinds of comics, were never supposed to be about violence in general, because if we go back to the other page, the heroes had like, as you put it, an incredible amount of agency, but they used their powers in a very responsible way and generally abstained from killing under any and all circumstances because they never thought themselves executioners, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the whole point, was that you had all this power, but you used it in a very responsible way. You used it in a way that wasn't, you know, overreaching, and you still tried to be a functioning person within the society. Like that was the whole point. And they all of these guys reflect that in some way. Like the whole point of X-Men is that, you know, you have these mutants and they have incredible powers, but everyone fears them, so they have to act in such a way that says that there's nothing to fear here. You know, like
Yeah.
because they want to function within regular society. You know, you have gods that have to be responsible for the people, but they use their powers in a responsible way. And I know that Bobby doesn't have powers, and I know that this is just a panel showing her fighting like what appear to be terrorists of some kind. But the fact that she's just executing them is really out of the spirit of what comics were, which was
how
to
do we know
send
they're
that
terrorists?
message.
I mean,
we
seriously,
don't know. We don't.
One
They have
has
uniforms. That's all we got.
A broom handle, and another has a mop. Like,
yeah.
And the other thing is that you just need balls to do all this. You know, so the fact that apparently this woman is some sort of psychotic killer. We just and a psychotic killer who's still upset over her home ec teacher not caring about her laser helmet.
Yes.
It's like this, it takes a lot of, this is not something that comes easy. Killing people is not something that comes easy. People who kill people are generally treated with it much differently. Their characterization, and it's an aspect of it's something that's not insignificant. Let's put it that way.
She basically sees that giant squid monster and sees her home ec teacher.
Yes.
And cuts off her tentacles. And that's what it is. She's just envisioning this right here is this man that she's shooting in the head
is her home ec teacher.
Yeah, is the home ec teacher that said,
or her mom who never had
get
any
back
time
to the
for her
Muffin
because
Project.
of feminism.
Yeah, or her mom who didn't give her attention because she was too busy fighting for equal pay, even though it had already been fought for.
Okay.
All right. So I think this is the last panel. Yeah.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. So here she is in her posh, awesome
underground
apartment,
or underwater apartment.
Yeah. And she's still doing science, and she's got all the stuff that I don't know, what is this a real book? These have to be real books. I'm Okay, You're Okay. And Pembroke Welsh Corgis? Welsh Corgis? Oh, I guess maybe that's her. Oh, she has a Welsh Corgi. Because Corgis are so in right now. They're so in right now. All right, they are. It's the dog. It's like they're like this dog that, I mean, my brother had one and I liked them and everything, but Jesus Christ. All right, so it says no more sexism, no more racism. Female heroes are just as celebrated as their male counterparts. We won the war, ladies. Ha, just kidding. It still sucks. Well, that is just bullshit. Patent bullshit. This is the thing, like, there hasn't been, I haven't seen as much racism and sexism in comics as I am today with the current modern comic writers injecting their ideology into comics. When I used to read them, if you read like from the 1970s, I mean, this goes before that, but I'll just use the 70s for an example. When they introduced the all-new, all-different X-Men, so I'm going to use X-Men as my example since I just saw the movie last night, but I knew it was a really good example of it anyway. They had characters from all over the world on the team. There was, they're male and female. They had Ms. Marvel, they had Storm, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Colossus, etc. Wolverine, Shadowcat, Rogue. There were men, there were girls, there were boys, there were women, there were people from all over, the people from Kenya, people from Russia, America, whatever. And they all worked together, and that whole conversation, that whole thing did not exist, didn't happen. And nobody who read those books thought that. They didn't say, man, I wish there were fewer black people in these comics. That did not happen, because comics readers were enjoying the escape, and they liked seeing them work together. And there wasn't what we have today, where it's like, oh, I wish there were fewer men in comics, or I wish that these men were, there were fewer straight guys, or there were fewer white guys. That didn't happen, but it happens today. How is it worse now than it was in the 80s, when you guys are the ones claiming that this is as good as it's gotten, and we still have a long way to go? No, it's bullshit. It still sucks. That's a lie. It's just a lie.
It didn't suck at all.
No.
Ever. It's like, what, do you have any, and I don't even think that they do. I don't think they read the history of this stuff. They don't read the history of science fiction. They don't look at what these individuals were writing, even 100 years ago, in science fiction of that era. It's remarkable. Like if gender equality had been left up to science fiction writers, we would be on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
But it was left up to feminists. And the thing is that feminists, I don't get the sense, and social justice warriors, I don't get the sense that they are interested in equality for equality. I think they're interested in being victims of inequality, and there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because if you're interested in equality as a principle, then you actually look at it as a principle. And you say, how can I embody this as a virtue and see it as a principle? You don't just constantly search for every possible way that you can view yourself as a victim. And this is what this, and the thing is that this was an established character who sounded like quite a badass prior to this. And they took all of that away from her to turn her into a victim. You know, and they talk about how, when we give the last comic book that we talked about was the Harley Quinn, and the fact that they gave her like a corset and made her sexier, and suddenly, in Kate Left's mind, who's a feminist, her mind, by emphasizing Harley's sex appeal, it removed all of her other personality. Mm-hmm. And that isn't actually what happened. She still, I'm pretty sure in that comic, she still was the Harley Quinn that people know and love. That she was just sexier. She's just exploring her sexuality. And suddenly, but it was in Kate Left's mind that a woman cannot be simultaneously sexy and a person. Because it is in Kate Left's mind that turns women into sex objects. You know, all she needs to do is show a picture of sexy Harley, and somehow that proves that Harley no longer has her own personhood. It doesn't. Unless you yourself believe that Harley being sexy is incompatible with Harley being a person. And that's your problem, Kate Leth. It's not anybody else's problem. Certainly not the people who write Harley Quinn and show off her sex appeal, especially if they aren't actually downplaying her personhood. You know, it's like you are the one who's creating this. Okay, so essentially they think that, or Kate Leth thinks that playing up Harley Quinn's sex appeal removes her personhood. And the reason why I say that she thinks that is because all she has to do is show us a picture of Harley Quinn sexy, and somehow just that removes all other aspect of Harley Quinn's personhood. Well, it doesn't, unless you believe that. And nobody believes that except Kate Leth. So heal thyself. And that's the same situation here. They've taken a female character and they've removed her agency by making her into a victim. And they never say, well, wait a second, maybe this, they never make the equivalence. Okay, turning Harley Quinn into a sex object removes her personhood. That's what they say. But turning Mockingbird into a victim object doesn't remove her personhood. Because all you've done, feminists, is turn this character into a victim object whose only purpose is to be a feminist talking point. And you don't see that. Like, Mockingbird was supposed to have agency, and you've taken it all away from her. And you turn around and point at Harley Quinn being sexy and saying, well, that takes away her personhood. No, it doesn't. Because it's not incompatible for seeing a person as a person and that person also being sexy. But it is incompatible to say that Mockingbird is a victim, but she also is a powerful agent. So you have just taken away that aspect of her to become a feminist talking point. And that's gross. And also, you're not empowering anybody with this. You're disempowering. And I'm starting to believe that's the point. I'm starting to believe that the point of all this is disempowerment of women and girls. Not empowerment. Disempowerment and turning them into
talking points.
Talking points and cattle in your narrative.
Yeah, it's basically exhibition. It's like, look at Exhibit A, Bobby Morse.
Exhibit B. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. That's all we are is just talking points in your narrative. We don't have any person, we don't have any personal agency, nothing. We're just talking points in the feminist narrative. This is just fucking, it's so, you don't create a character that's empowering this way.
Mm-hmm.
By making them a victim of men. It's like, what the fuck is that message? And this is all they do, is they just go in places and they turn women into victims where they're not. And anytime you challenge this process of making women into a class victim, they say it's misogyny. I wanted to actually, because one of the reasons why I suggested this, Brian, is I wanted to talk about my own comic.
Okay.
I don't know if that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And maybe we could, I could share screens now, maybe.
Yeah. Let me stop.
Okay. Because there was something like, when I had a conversation, okay, just a little bit of background for people don't know. I have written a science fiction comic whose the main character is a woman. And recently, the science fiction comic is essentially, it's a story about the far future. Earth has sent out successive waves of colonization, and they've started to interact with each other. And they have very different societies, very different conceptions, often very different, like, physical physiology. And essentially, so these waves, these successive waves of colonization from Earth have just started to meet up and interact, and two of the largest have started a war. And so the female character's name is Ankoa. She is a scientist, and she's currently in the opening sequence. She's currently dealing with a massive decompression after the engine that she developed and built and tested underwent a critical failure and resulted in a hull breach. And that's where the story opens up. And what was interesting to me is that when I talked to some people who have read this, one of the people who read it said that the female character seems like her. She likes the female character, and he actually found the female character inspiring. And the reason why is that she appeared to him to have really earned the skills and abilities that she has. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, but I never really show you. No, maybe you could. No, let's see how I can share this. I never really show anyone. I never really show her learning it. I never really show her. I don't go through this whole sequence like with Mockingbird, where she's a student and she's doing science or anything. All I really show is her doing this stuff in a situation where all hell is breaking loose. And it's not like there's any enemies or anything, but there's this explosive decompression, there's electrical fires, there's issues with the air, and she is focused on fixing the problem, like a laser. Even to the point where, she in two cases, she's being distracted by other people who are concerned about the issue, because it is concerning. And she's like, yeah, don't stop distracting me, I gotta fix this. And when I was talking to him about his impression that she had earned her talent, and the fact that I had never actually showed her earning it, we were trying to figure out why, and that was why. Because she was able to focus so clearly on the task at hand, even at threat of her own life. And that's how you show empowerment. Mm-hmm. That's how you show a female character being able to do something. You show her as determined, and you show her the consequences, and create a situation. You don't, like, none of that situations that they put Mockingbird in appeared to be in any way believable. Partially because Mockingbird is apparently a character who's still concerned about what her home ec teacher said about her, when she was 12. I mean, if you look at all of the stuff that she's talking about being horrible, none of it rates a merit, a mention. It's all banal. I mean, this is her origin story? Her mom ignored her at an ER rally and her home ec teacher didn't appreciate her laser? This is it? This is what drives her morally and emotionally? Like, it's so fucking trivial. Her victimhood is so trivial. So painfully trivial. And the fact that she wasn't accidentally turned into a super. Yeah. It's such a petty, childish, immature. And it makes her look petty, childish, and immature. That she's creating victimhood out of such insignificant events. And she's focusing, rather than focusing on what she can do, she's focusing on what she can't do. That doesn't make a good superhero. Someone who focuses on what they can't do and doesn't focus on what they can do. It doesn't make an admirable character. It doesn't make a character who looks determined, who looks like she's earned what she's gotten. Whereas, I mean, like, with the character that I created, I don't even ever, and in fact, she throughout her entire progress in the story, and she does have some pretty dark, like, she goes dark places, and I allude to it even in the first 2 volumes. And she's had shit done to her. At no point in the entire story does she whine like this. Does she emphasize what was done to her? In fact, she deliberately de-emphasizes what's done to her. The thing that broke this character, and this is spoilers, I'll try not to be too spoilery, but the thing that most emotionally broke the female character that I write about, the main female character that I write about, was not what was done to her. It was what she failed to do. It's something she failed to be able to do.
Yeah. Something that she has to take responsibility for.
Well, no, that's just, she gets the specific thing. Okay, yes, spoilers, but most people don't read my story, so it's not a big deal. What she failed to do was she was a POW, she was a prisoner of war, and she lost someone in the process. And that's what broke her. As she lost one of, she was in logistics, actually the Army Corps of Engineers, basically, and she was an officer, and she lost one of the people under her command, and that fucked her up completely. Not being a POW, not being a prisoner of war, not enduring what POWs endure, which includes rape and torture. What fucked her up was failing to save someone. And that's the kind of character she is. And apparently it comes through even at the beginning. That she is completely focused, not on what she can't do. Because if this was apparently their version of Mockingbird in this situation, she would be focusing on, I don't know, God knows what. Some man isn't coming to save her from being ignored by her home ec teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, they've created a victim. They've turned Mockingbird into a victim. Into someone who focuses on what they can't do and what's been done to them rather than what they can do. And it's pathetic. And that's not how you create an empowering female character. You create an empowering female character by showing a character, and this is an inspiring female character, not just for women, but also for men. You create an inspiring female character by showing them focusing on what they can do in times and places where people would focus on what's about to happen to them. Mm-hmm. Because this female character that I wrote could easily, and this decompression is happening, just fold in on, oh, we're going to die, or I'm going to die, but she didn't. She focused on what she could do to prevent further destruction, or her own death, or her comrade's death, or her colleague's death. And I've spurged enough on my own shit. And that's essentially what made this individual who read it regard her as an inspiring character, and a determined character, and a character who had earned her stripes. And Mockingbird, what they've turned Mockingbird into, is fucked up.
Yeah. And again...
Especially...
Go ahead.
Especially based on what you said she was before.
Oh, yeah.
She sounded like she was a character who looked at what she could do. Every time, every moment. What can I do? What can I do to make this? What can I do to get people through this moment? To save lives, to save things that are valuable. What can I do? And they turned her into a character who says, "I can't do that because people would think people's opinions. I can't do that because my patriarchies. I can't do that because I'm a victim." They turned her from I can to I can't, and they call it empowerment. It's fucked up. Yeah, I mean, when she's fixing it, she's obviously in physical distress, yeah. and the situation is really dire, but she's still focused on fixing. the situation.
Yeah, and there are stories like, like that in other comics. I think that and we were talking about manga earlier, Japanese comics, and that even the ones that aren't aimed at girls specifically will have stuff like this where they just sort of like, it just comes down to people who are willing, to get it done, whether they're male or female, and then the ones that are observers or are just basically like eternal victims. It just comes down to that, and they don't generally gender those people. They just do it depending on who they want in terms of their story, and so it's not. I wouldn't be overly pessimistic about what's going on with Mockingbird, but I do think that that's a really, considering that the people who at Marvel thought that this was a good idea, I'm concerned for where their head is at, especially again going back to what I was saying before, that this is what they thought girl readers wanted. This is what they think of girls that read their books.
A victim.
Yeah. That's what they want.
A victim. A woman who dwells, and they all do, like every single female character that these people get their hands on ends up with the same sort of just bitter, envious,
insecure,
focusing on insecure, just focusing on being a victim, on being what was done to her, and focusing on I can't rather than I can. And it's just,
yeah, it's
disheartening. And it's I guess it's just, I wonder if it's just the end of a medium. Like when we see this shit happening, it's like it's almost like the corpse beetles have taken over the corpse. Throes. Yeah, not even the death throes. It's like the things that are feeding off of the dead flesh are starting to crawl out. When we see this artistic medium being co-opted by really obvious political sentiment.
Oh yeah, and considering what I was thinking was, I know that we've been going off and kind of criticizing the artwork and finding problems with it and stuff. And actually, one of the things that I'm asking myself is, and this is another reason why I want to learn more, is it possible that they are actually getting less talented people, less talented artists and writers, because the writing is awful, and it's one of the reasons to meet a quota. It's because they think, oh, well, we're going to make a book. I don't know, because I'm still having trouble finding out. But what if they just hired a female artist and a female writer because they needed more females, and even though these people were like subpar. I'm gonna try to find out right now, actually, because I do know what issue number is. I just figured it out. So it is possible, because otherwise, writer by Chelsea Kane, and the artist is Katie Nimzik, and the cover artist is another woman named Jolie Jones. So there you go. It's an all-woman team. This is what they
awful.
Made. Yeah.
This is awful. And this is what they turn all of these, they take these female characters who are defined by their agency because they're fucking superheroes, and they turn them into victims. And nobody calls them out on this shit.
Yep.
Nobody says, what the fuck are you doing? This isn't like slapping a corset on Harley and making her sexy. This is totally changing the essential character of these characters, of these female characters. And they all become the same bitter, envious, bitchy, chip on their shoulder victim. All of them. They're all written exactly the same.
Here's a little bit of information. Yeah. Here's a little bit of information about Chelsea Kane, the writer. She's a novelist and a columnist. She went to the University of California at Irvine and University of Iowa. She was born in 1972 in Iowa. She spent her early childhood in a hippie commune outside of Iowa City. Her father resisted the Vietnam draft, and her parents lived underground for several years. In 1978, she moved with her mother in Bellingham, Washington, where she attended Lowell Elementary. She left to pursue political science at the University of California. She wrote for the university newspaper and became opinion editor. I wonder what she wrote about. While in Iowa, she wrote a memoir called Dharma Girl about her early childhood in the hippie commune. One of her professors presented it to several others for review. This was when she was 24 years old. She's I'm looking at her bibliography. I just wanted to get an idea of where her head is at. Dharma Girl, Wild Child, Girlhoods in the Counterculture. So apparently she believes herself part of the counterculture. The Hippie Handbook, How to Tie-Dye a T-Shirt, Flash a Peace Sign, and Other Essential Skills for a Carefree Life. Does This Cape Make Me Look Fat? Pop Psychology for Superheroes. So I wonder if that's how she got her job writing this comic book. Mm-hmm. She wrote this book. I'm just pointing out, she's a writer with like a lot under her belt, and this book is that bad. And I'm sorry, but comics is not that difficult. You know, when you consider compared to other kinds of writing, you know. So let me see.
It is pretty bad.
It's awful. I mean, it's so ham-fisted.
It's ham-fisted in what she's done to the characters. She's basically murdered a character and put herself into the skin. She's like Buffalo Bill, except character writing. Or sorry, comics writer. It's just, ugh.
There's definitely some kind of disconnect, like, between the comics publisher, Marvel, or DC, because they both are guilty of it, and their audience. And the way that they're out of touch seems to be that I imagine them in the boardroom saying, we got to make more comics aimed at girls. How do we do that? And then someone was like, well, the most important thing is that it is written and illustrated by girls. And whatever after that, then forget it. Okay, well, and who's a good female writer that we can get? Well, here's this one that wrote all this feminist stuff. So why don't we get her? Because girls like feminism. Like, girls by default must like feminism. Therefore, we must get her a feminist writer. And the writer must be a woman as well. So no male feminists or whatever. And then we'll also get a female artist off of Tumblr. I actually believe that a lot of comic artists started off on Tumblr. And they're probably cheaper labor than comic artists used to be, like in the time of... say like the 80s and 90s when it was more difficult to get exposure and the standards were probably a lot higher. So, and that could also be a part of the reason why the industry is it's struggling, because they're not making as much sales off the books because people aren't buying as often, and they're making way more money off the films and stuff. And if they're not making as much money off of the books, then they're probably not paying their employees as much because they can't. So they're just getting employees that are willing to work for less. And, I mean, that's just my suspicion, but I don't really know. So.
Yeah, it's this is just a failure. And I think it's partially because I'm starting to get the feeling, I actually, this is something that occurred to me when I was thinking about art and artists and how the role that art has in just finding that lightning in a bottle, these new ideas, these new ways of expressing or new ways of thinking about human nature. And I'm just wondering if, because this all of this stuff, like this comic that we just went through extensively, these dynamics just bore me to tears. I mean, it's fun to talk about it with you, Brian, because there's a certain element of a roast to it. But just presenting women as victims, like, do you ever get tired of that?
Oh, I do.
Like, do you ever get tired of this is a rhetorical question to the feminists who do it. Do you ever get tired of restricting women to pointillism in their character? Just restricting them to simply being just something that reacts to men's actions, because that's what you're doing. What you're presenting is that men are the prime movers and women simply react to them. The home ec teacher is just reacting to a patriarchal society. Her mother is just reacting to a patriarchal society. She's just reacting to a patriarchal society. Women are never prime movers in and of themselves. It's always, you have to always trace the momentum back to a man. I mean, do you ever get tired of that? Do you ever think about what you're doing to the female characters? You're all turning them into the same character. Non-character, incidentally. You're all turning them basically into a measuring stick for men. And that's it. That's all and that just doesn't work. With a female character who's supposed to be not just powerful, not just potent, not just normal human ability to do shit in her life. She's supposed to be superhuman. Even when she isn't superhuman empowered, she's still superhuman. Because she's at the peak of athletic ability, or she's brilliant, or something. You're taking these female characters and you're basically dashing their brains out, skinning them, and making them puppets for feminism. And then you're turning around and calling this fucking shit empowerment. I am fucking glad that I found men's rights and men's issues. My mother gave me that fucking book, Princess at the Window, because I'm glad that I evaded this bullshit of seeing myself in terms of being a victim of society. Because I could just imagine, I could just imagine being a feminist, being you, being the woman who wrote this shit. And this is how she sees her life. Because she turned Mockingbird into an autobiography. You realize that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I was looking at her background.
She changed
some things, but
but this is her. She's writing herself now. This is what she lives. She lives in the world of I can't. I can't. I can't. I am so fucking glad that men's rights came around and prevented me from having to live in that world that she lives in, that Chelsea Kane lives in, the world of I can't, of I'm a victim. I can't. I'm just a reaction to men. I can't. I'm just a substrate that men write their actions on. I can't. This is what I hear. And this is supposed to be fucking empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the audacity, the gall, to point at men's rights and men's issues and say, we want to roll back the clock. Right, ladies, because, seeing men as having vulnerabilities and not seeing women as being victims of society, of something, or not seeing women in terms of men's actions. Because that's what you do. You see women in terms of men's actions. What the fuck do you think internalized misogyny is? You are seeing women in terms of men's actions. Reducing every action, choice, thought, belief of a woman down to a man's actions. You really think that isn't regressive? You really think that questioning that isn't actually a progressive act?
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, if you're listening to this and you wanted to support the continued questioning of this kind of shit, www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. So we can continue to bring that lightning in the bottle that is men's rights and men's issues. That those ideas at just the edge of the ken of humankind. Because that's where we are. That's what men's rights and men's issues, these are the things that people have never looked at throughout all of human history. They have never looked at men's vulnerabilities. None of history is about that. It's all about men's strength and men's power and men's ability to do things and act. This is completely new territory. It's completely virgin territory, and it's fucking bracing. From just a creative standpoint, it's inspiring. The way it can inform characterization, the way it can inform plot lines, the way it can inform how we put ideas together. That's fucking inspiring. But this shit, this feminist shit that's all regressive, women are just reactions to men, that's not inspiring. It's just awful.